You know who I'm talking about. They're on your friends list, they watch your stories, they're definitely there. But their own profile? It's a total ghost town. No selfies, no life updates, not even a blurry photo of their lunch. They are the digital ghosts. And in a world that practically screams for our attention, these people are fascinatingly, intentionally invisible. So, why?
So that's the big question, right? Why do some people just never post online? I mean, in this hyper-connected world, it feels a little strange. Are they shy? Are they hiding something? Well, it turns out psychology has a lot to say about this, and it's not random at all. In fact, this choice, or lack of choice, can reveal a ton about a person's confidence, their mindset, and even their emotional intelligence.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the reality completely flips our common assumptions on their head. You know, we might assume someone who doesn't post is shy or antisocial, but the psychological truth, they probably just have a really high privacy orientation. We think they might be insecure, but actually, they often have incredibly strong self-awareness and are very emotionally secure. We call them weird? Nope. Try intentional and grounded. In other words, what we often see as a weakness might just be a serious hidden strength.
Okay, so let's dig in, starting with the most straightforward reason. And it really just boils down to a fundamental choice, valuing your privacy way more than your popularity.
So what does that really mean? Well, psychologists have a term for it, a high privacy orientation. This is basically a tendency to want control over your personal info, and just as important, your own mental space. Instead of looking for validation from likes and comments and shares, these folks rely on self-validation. They just don't need to broadcast their life to feel good about living it. And that, right there, is a quiet but super powerful sign of inner security.
I love this quote because it just hits the nail on the head. It says, when someone asks, why don't you ever post anything? What they're really asking is, why don't you need the attention that I need? And wow, that just reframes the entire conversation, doesn't it? It's not about a lack of sharing, it's about a lack of needing that external pat on the back. Okay, so we've got privacy, but let's go a layer deeper, because this builds from just privacy into something much more profound, a truly unshakable sense of who you are. There's this amazing concept called self-concept clarity, which was first really explored by a psychologist named Jennifer Campbell. And at its core, it's a state where you have a really clearly defined, consistent, and stable idea of who you are. And here's the key takeaway. When you truly know who you are on the inside, you don't need an algorithm or a social media feed to confirm it for you on the outside. This is probably my favorite analogy for it, the mirror versus the window. See, most people use social media like a mirror. They post something to see a reflection of themselves, and then they wait for the likes and the comments to tell them if that reflection is good, to tell them who they are. Their identity gets built on all that external feedback. But the quiet user, they use it like a window. They look out, they observe the world, they take things in without that constant need for reflection. Their identity, well, that's built from within. And this all connects directly to two very different types of self-esteem. First, you've got fragile self-esteem. It's fragile. It needs constant feeding from outside sources like likes and comments to stay afloat. And then you have secure self-esteem. It just stands on its own. It doesn't need external validation. In fact, a study from 2021 found that if your self-esteem is already secure, social media barely even makes a dent. You're not avoiding the platform because you're insecure, you're just not engaging because you don't need it to feel whole.
But look, it's not always that simple and straightforward. We really need to explore a critical nuance here. And that's the question of whether this silence is a healthy boundary or a protective wall.
So we really have to ask ourselves, is this online silence always a choice that's being made from a place of strength? The honest answer is not always. And understanding that difference is absolutely key. This comment from a viewer is it's incredibly powerful, and it gets right to the heart of this other side of the coin. They wrote, I stopped posting photos because every time I saw my own face, I remembered every comment my classmates made about how I looked. See, that's not about privacy, that's about protection. That's about old wounds. So let's really break down this difference, because it matters. A boundary, that's built from strength. It's about protecting your peace. A wall, on the other hand, is built from wounds, and it's usually about hiding your shame. A boundary is a conscious choice for privacy. You are choosing to be unseen. But a wall, that's often an unconscious protection from pain, where you're actually afraid of being seen. It's a really, really important distinction to make, especially for ourselves. But this whole thing isn't just about our individual psychology.
We need to zoom out for a second, because a lot of the time, people who don't post are simply reacting to the entire social media ecosystem and its infamous, soul-crushing comparison game.
You know, this instinct to compare ourselves to others, it's nothing new. Way back in 1954, a psychologist named Leon Festinger developed social comparison theory, which basically says we have this innate drive to see how we stack up against everyone else. But then, in the 2000s, social media came along and took that basic human instinct and put it on steroids. It turned it into a 24/7, never-ending hamster wheel of comparison. And today, for the sake of their own sanity, a lot of people are making the very conscious choice to just step off the wheel entirely. And trust me, this is not some niche feeling. On a video about this exact topic, one person commented, "What type of world do we live in that not showing your photos to the entire world is considered weird?" That single, simple comment got 28,000 likes. Clearly, tens of thousands of people feel the exact same pressure. So if you feel this way, you are definitely not alone.
So, let's bring it all home. What's the real takeaway here? I think it's all about reframing silence. Not seeing it as an absence of something, but as its own form of presence and its own form of strength.
And the first thing we all need to burn into our brains is this: being unseen is not the same thing as being insignificant. Your value is never, ever determined by your online visibility. Because at the end of the day, your true identity is formed in private, not performed in public. The real growth, the stuff that actually shapes who you are, that happens away from the feed, far away from the likes. And finally, maybe the most important point of all, real confidence isn't the loud, curated performance of self you see online. It's the quiet, calm assurance of who you are offline. It's knowing who you are when absolutely nobody is watching. So I'll leave you with this. In a world that rewards noise, that begs for our attention 24/7, what does your silence say about you? Is it a boundary or a wall? A choice or a fear? The answer says everything.